Welcome to another edition of Interruption. I'm your host, Otis Smith. Today, my next guest, she is the first female music director of many award shows. She also has composed and scored for different movies. She is a trained classical pianist. She is also in her music. She has fused jazz, pop, and R&B. She also gave us the classic we all love and know her from, which is Forget Me Not. I always like to say, please forget me not. So I'm talking no other than the beautiful, talent Patrice Rushen. How you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I,
Excellent.
I thought I was going to have the deepest interview with you than any interview you have done until I saw an interview you did, and I said, "No, that lady there, that's nothing." Ooh, I
What
don't know
interview was that?
I don't know the lady's name. It was you was sitting down, I guess on the couch or something. You was sitting down speaking to a white lady, had short hair, and she was asking you some real deep musical questions. So I thought it was very informative. It was very informative. So how have
Great.
you been with the pandemic and everything? How have you been doing?
Oh, you know, it's not been so great. And at the
Hmm.
same time, there's a lot of good things that I think are going to come out of it after after we deal with the big hurt of what it has been.
Right.
Um, you know, uh, Fortunately, everyone has to do their part to try to keep as many of us as healthy as possible. And I'm working with a lot of students, and they're having
Okay.
a tough time because of the adjustment to being completely online. For
Sure.
some subjects, works better than others. Music is not one of the ones that works particularly well.
Right.
So the performing ensembles and the kinds of things that are
Hmm.
activities that are just part of what we do as musicians, even from the professional standpoint, of playing. It's been a while. It's been a long
Right.
time without being able
Right.
to work together.
Right.
But from that has emerged also, looking at the silver lining, a lot
Sure.
more emphasis and a lot more time that we can spend on things that we may have either taken for granted or find other ways to try to, if not replicate, just
Uh
add
huh.
on to what it is that gives us a chance to do what we do the best. So little
Okay.
by little, those kinds of adjustments are being made where they can, and help us cope with the most negative parts of the pandemic, and we
Okay.
may come out of this thing with some additional ways to be able to handle things, and certainly I think be more mindful and thoughtful in terms of taking care of one another and our health.
Sure. And what's important? My first question for you today is: can you talk to me about um, how your musical education, your background in music, how does that serve? How did that serve you in your career?
Well, just like anything else, there's always people who are out there who maybe are didn't have an opportunity or didn't for whatever reason study.
Sure.
But I think that when you have that opportunity and you can,
Hmm.
and there's ways and places for you to go to be able to um, further your knowledge, I think knowledge is power. So I think that's
Right.
good. And so that's what I tried to do. um, I've never really done anything else outside of
Hmm.
music.
Okay.
But learning how to do that well taught me a lot about life. It taught me a lot about a lot of different things. I definitely see almost everything through the lens of an artist, of course,
Okay.
but still, you come in contact with certain kinds of, life lessons, etc., just through your activity with music. Kids who love sports, they come in contact
Sure.
with some of those same life lessons through sports, or people who love science, they come in contact with certain life lessons through science. So um, I think when you really love something too,
Hmm.
you want to give yourself some insurance that you'll be able to do that thing that you love the most. And
Okay.
one of the things that you can do in getting an education is offer yourself multiple paths to where you're trying to go. Not just one path, multiple
Multiple
paths.
paths.
And so again, it has been my good fortune, and it's worked out well for me. And I try to motivate other people to look at that as a possibility for themselves as well, especially because today there are so many places where you can go to receive an education that
Hmm.
allows you to really be able to hone in on your interest and uh, meet people and do the kinds of things that make your life really fulfilled.
Well, I call you a maestro. You are a master of music. What if you can explain? Because the reason we call the show interruption, because we want to interrupt that thought process of what people think is real or what's not real. Based on whatever the topic is. Um, can you explain, kind of, if you can, the intricacies, the difference between jazz and R&B?
Woo! Oh, that's a deep subject. Thought you weren't gonna get deep, man.
No, I said I thought I was going to be deeper than her.
Well, I gotta tell you, and there you
Hmm.
ask several people, you might get a different opinion. But this
Sure.
is mine. I
Okay.
I, I think that R&B and jazz are branches of the same tree.
Okay.
I don't think you have totally one without the other one.
Gotcha.
They
Okay.
they they are slightly different dialects of the same language.
Okay.
So it would be very difficult for somebody like myself to
Hmm.
try to give you any other definition other than a very broad one, because from a
Sure.
nuance standpoint, it gets pretty much in the weeds of specifics. But in terms of the broad strokes,
Hmm.
jazz is probably one of the few musics that revolves around the art of improvisation.
Okay.
So
Okay.
you have a song that you play, a composition that you play, and then the tradition of jazz is that you use a certain massive amount of information and language to be able to expound upon that story in your own way in real time, right now, with the other musicians on the bandstand. Spontaneous composition
Okay.
is a part of the witnessing of that music, and that music, when it's uh, in the hands of people who have a wide vocabulary and who are elegant and eloquent in the way that they offer it,
Okay.
can make for some amazing musical moments in that moment. And it comes and it goes, but it's because it's instant.
Okay. Okay.
R&B, rhythm and blues,
Hmm.
is just what it says. The focus of it is the rhythm, and the
Okay.
fact that it comes, its main driver is the concept of the blues.
Okay.
So you say, okay, well, not only does that mean in terms of blues and as a form, it has evolved certainly from that
Sure.
being one strict form. You can do it in different forms, but the idea is that that music is based in some of the tradition of the blues. Much of the blues tradition involved a certain kind of communication and a certain kind of um what can I say, idea that that communication could relate to every man, you know.
Gotcha. I got you.
And in the tradition of the blues, that's why the blues could be both happy and sad at the same time. It could make you
Correct.
happy, and then it could be, but the messaging could be very sad, or vice versa. So the rhythm aspect of that obviously revolved through the medium of dance. But you see, jazz was dance music at one time. That's why I say
Correct.
branches of
Yes, it
the same tree.
was. Yeah. Yeah. Correct.
So the idea, I believe, is just in these days and times, I think that um, we use that term to not necessarily define more of a certain kind of music, but a certain kind of feel and certain kind
Sure.
of vibe. But when you talk to someone like me, you may be asking the wrong person, because I
No.
love so
No.
many different kinds of music, and everything that I maybe do is influenced by all of those different kinds of music. At
Gotcha.
any one time, you're going to hear the blues come through, you're going to hear R&B come through, you're going to hear the tradition of jazz come
Sure.
through, you're going to hear this amalgamation, and the both of those musics are about progression.
Correct.
And so that's how I'll define it for you today.
No, the reason I asked you that question, and because I can tell when somebody has a real deep background in jazz, because when I interviewed Najee, he gave a different answer than you, but kind of similar, which is music is music. So a jazz artist looks at it, or someone heavily influenced by jazz just looks at different sounds that I'm just going to implement versus someone that's say I got to be in this particular pocket because I'm an R&B artist. And so I like the way you stayed with the R&B because I'm taking from the broad, brush that you painted with the R&B is kind of somewhat like with Jane Brown. Always talked about, his thing was on the one to the two to the three to the four, then back to the one. So you had that rhythm composition, that groove that you find, and then the blues part of it is just a part of what I guess what you're saying within the lyrics
Mhm.
of the music. So,
Well, in my mind, and this
hmm,
is where I do agree absolutely with Najee, is
uh-huh,
that in my mind, in most forms of music, from opera to hip hop, there's
sure,
five main elements of music that make music music.
right,
You have melody of some sort, you have harmony represented of some sort, you have rhythm represented of some sort, you have tone represented in terms of the dynamic of the music and the
right,
feeling of the music and the communication of the music,
hmm,
and you have color. What instrument is doing it? Is it voice? Is it guitar? Is it
gotcha,
drums? Is it what? Okay, those elements are present in every kind of music.
right,
What's more forward or more back is what for me determines stylistically what we call it.
gotcha,
So in R&B, whereas in jazz, the pulse and the rhythm may not be as obviously pronounced as it might be in R&B, where the rhythm comes forward.
right,
Maybe in jazz, maybe the harmony is more pronounced.
gotcha,
Maybe the melody is more pronounced. Whereas in Latin music, there's a certain kind of rhythm that is more pronounced.
okay,
In classical music, the same elements are there, but maybe the tone is more pronounced, or the
gotcha,
timbre, the color is more pronounced, and
gotcha,
harmony might be more pronounced. But they're always there at all times. That's what makes music music. So
gotcha,
that's where I do agree with Najee, where music is music, and the style and what we call it, how we label it, how we market it, and all of
sure.
that are a matter of certain kinds of manipulation of those styles. But the enjoyment factor, if it's well done,
It's still the same. You enjoy it.
exactly.
What is the can if you explain what is the, and I asked Marvin Warren this question. I wanted to get your thoughts on it. Is what is the difference between producing the track, right? Laying the or the music, I should say, not the track, but just producing the music and producing the artist.
Okay, well, I'm gonna assume that you're saying when you say artist, you mean that the artist is as a
Oh yeah,
vocalist,
yeah, as a
or
vocalist. I'm sorry. Yes, as a vocalist.
okay. I don't think there is a difference philosophically,
Okay.
because a producer's job is to provide the best environment for the artists to come through.
Okay.
Now, I said artist in the broader stroke because every musician that plays on it
Okay.
is also an artist.
Right.
When the producer casts people to play in that environment, or
Mm-hmm.
chooses the song, or chooses the right approach from the sonics or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
artistry is in play, or should be, in every element.
Okay.
And then when the featured artist, or whose record it is,
Sure.
comes and does their part, that environment is laid, and then a big part of the job becomes being able to listen in such a way that you get the best possible performance from that featured person.
Okay.
So I don't see a difference. I see an adjustment in role play. I see an adjustment in the end game, in the goal.
Right.
But the idea of what a producer
Mm-hmm.
philosophically is supposed to be doing is allow the artistry of all the best components to come through to create that environment, so that the featured artist, the ones whose record it is,
Sure.
has the best opportunity to shine.
That's why I can tell maestros. because it was, like I said, he said it a little bit different, right? But pretty much same thing. And so I'm always curious, different people thought process and people, what was, how do they feel about certain things? What was it like for you? Performing in the 70s and the 80s, what was the vibe like at that time musically? And when you were doing your live performance, the video, I fell in love with you with the video of but oh yeah, you had the yeah,
The
yeah.
red,
I
the
was like,
beat.
yeah, I was like, that's my baby right there. That's I got to find her.
Oh wow! Oh wow! Well, it was a different time. I mean, there was music all around, and there were ways to be able to see. I think the biggest difference is that we were able to see the effect that music had on people because
Okay.
we had television shows that supported people just responding to music, dancing. Soul Train,
Right.
American Dancing. You could actually see what music does to people. You had the Ed Sullivan Show, a variety show. You had Johnny Carson, and you had all of these different shows where music was part of the um, character of the presentation. And without it, you didn't have anything. And it made you appreciate, at least me, appreciate different styles and different ways that people were
Sure.
performing, and how music brings you into something or keeps you engaged in something. That's why I really loved television music and film music so much.
Right.
And it was everywhere. My parents would just wake up and it was just habitual, turn on the radio.
Right.
That was just what we did. That's how you got your news in the community. That's how you
Yep.
learned what was happening. That's how you found out what was cool and what was coming out or what came out already or something new. There was that kind of thing happening around all the time. So the ambience was such that you could go hear music, you could go see music, you could see it on TV, you
Sure.
heard it in the store. You couldn't get away from from music as a way of life. And we had music in the public schools when I was back in that day. So I grew up with music in the schools and stuff, and that was just
Okay.
part of what was there as a well-rounded education and as an option for kids who wanted to play. Um, by the time I was out of school, though, which was early '70s, out of high school and out of out
Right.
of high school in early '70s, and went to college, sort of trying to craft the knowledge and information to be able to form a career.
Mm-hmm.
There was still a lot of music out there of all kinds, and Um, I was very attracted to jazz from the compositional aspect and
Okay.
the historical aspect of our people being the proponents of that music, the inventors of that music. That was a
Right.
very important aspect of what drew me to it.
Okay.
Um, and certainly dance music and things like that. And you could do them all at the same time.
Yeah.
So we were living in a world where you could know the number one tune of the week and at the same time appreciate Miles Davis or John Coltrane. You could appreciate the connection
Yes.
between this music representing this spectrum. And in the '80s, actually being able to, have the good fortune of touring and things like that, seeing different
Right.
parts of the country, seeing different parts of the world, and seeing people responding to the music that I was putting out there. It was amazing. And meeting my peers who were
Uh huh.
doing similar things.
Right.
So my peer group had people in it like Michael Jackson and
Yes.
Prince and Shaka Khan, and we were all fans of one another and learning all the time. And you talked about Najee, and when when
Oh.
when when the Quiet Storm label became a thing. We have to
Yes.
label everything. It just can't be music. We have to. But the idea was that we were around the same age or so. And so the
Yes.
sensibilities of having a high artistic aesthetic
Right.
with commercial sensibilities wasn't foreign to us. Didn't feel
Right.
like two separate pieces. Felt like
Right.
one. We grew up on the Stevie Wonders and the Aretha Franklins
Yep.
and all the music, all the different iterations of Motown and the Beatles and Rolling Stones and
Right.
Sly Stone. We could appreciate all of these different kinds of things and see them as building blocks that influenced each other.
Right, because they did.
derivative of some of the same sources that we talked about before in terms of in jazz and R&B.
B, yeah.
So it was a glorious time because it was just about going for it and trying things. And
I missed I missed that
for many
time.
of us, that was the game changer, is that we were allowed to grow up
Sure.
finding ourselves, and that journey was appreciated, by our audiences, and the marketing and the other kinds of
Mm-hmm.
important tools that for selling purposes weren't totally absorbing the music.
Okay.
They worked a little more, it seemed like, a little more hand in hand. We're almost back to that because the industry has changed so much that the marketing and the hype that goes along with stuff, people are not necessarily buying into that in the same way. They're looking for a certain quality and a certain truth,
Do you feel, because I do, so you may interruptions with this question, but do you feel one of the things that are missing in music is just love, period? To and let me give some context on that question. When what I mean by that is singing and speaking about love, and then just having the love for what you do versus trying to chase the dollar.
Yeah, I feel like that. It. I ask my students the first day of school, why are they doing what they're doing?
Okay.
And I say, who wants to be famous? And I wait for the hands to go up, and some of them try to like not. I say, you're lying. You do want to be, and ain't nothing wrong with fame, nothing
Right.
at all. I'm all for it. But I think what they forget, or sometimes what we need to be reminded of, is that
Sure.
fame is usually the result of something.
Hmm.
It's a
Okay.
result. If
Okay.
you're going towards it because that's what you want to be, if you get there, which you probably won't, it'll be very short-lived.
Right.
Very short-lived. It's a result of something that is extraordinary about the way you do what you do, or have gone about doing the thing you do.
Right.
That's what focuses eyes on you, but more importantly, that's what keeps eyes on you. And that as you evolve,
Mm-hmm.
so does your audience, and so do the people that enjoy your music or whatever it is that you do, because this is not relegated only to music. So sometimes you see people who really fixate on the fame part,
Right.
and but they don't fixate. So I have millions of eyes on me, but what do I know how to do? And that part is kind of key. So what do you do?
Right.
um there are always people that luck out a little bit, but then they come and they go. And if that's not the kind of career that you want,
Mm-hmm.
then I think that the idea of chasing that
Mm-hmm.
exclusively is dangerous. Now,
Gotcha.
you talked about the love and what you do, and that's why we all have to learn to appreciate the fact that everything that things take time,
Mm-hmm.
and nothing comes fast. Some faster for some than others, but nothing
Sure.
comes real fast. Nothing comes without a commitment to a game plan and how you're going to get there.
Right.
And while there's probably 1,000 ways that people can shoot this down, I would say that the first thing is to really have something about this thing. You would do it for free. You love it that much.
Right.
If you never got famous, if your level of success is about, if I could keep my lights on, eat, take care of my family, pay my bills, go on a trip every now and then, and do what I love to make that happen,
Right.
I'm good. I
Yeah.
mean, that's for a level of success that a lot of people forget about that, and they're trying to go for this brass ring that's really not there. Because you in the with the kind of work that you do,
Mm-hmm.
there's a part of it that where you have to really love it. And people are at the point where they can tell. There's a lot of stuff out there and everybody has access. That's right. Everybody can find a little instrument and learn to play. put a few beats on and da 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 da, and go out there and call themselves, so on and so forth. And they may, get a following, or they may be out there for 10 or 15 minutes. But when it's done, it's done. And as that audience begins to grow and become more discerning and
Hmm.
wants to pass information on through the music, because that has
Right.
been a big part of the role of the artist, is that we pass information. We
Hmm.
are a mirror of our society, and we are also the possibilities for how it can be different, hopefully better. I think people are ready for that too, and it becomes more obvious the further we go. The more obvious it becomes that people respect artistry, and they usually you know you are rewarded in that when you can be happy. You happy doing what you're doing? You're a rich man.
I always said that. I always said that. That's always been my philosophy. If I want something and someone doesn't want as much as, say, I want, they've already accomplished, what they wanted. If I'm still striving to reach for, whatever it is that thing that I'm reaching for, then that's fine too. I'm striving for it. But what you talked about is that quote unquote American dream that, that everybody seems to think is the same thing. And actually, it's not, because everybody doesn't want the same thing. Just like you said, some people's like, hey, my bills are paid. I can kind of still do pretty much what I like to do and what I want to do. They're good and they're successful. So you can't put um, money as a source of successful and how much money. I tell my wife all the time. I said, look, I can't be a billionaire, because I can't keep up with all these bank account passcodes. I can't do all that. So I'm not, I'm not, I'm not trying to be a billionaire. For those that are, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that's not my goal and what I'm reaching for. Um, what for you? um how did you get in, how did it come about that you started composing, I mean not composing, but directing, orchestrating, for different award shows? For years seeing you doing that and being the first female, and I want everybody to pay attention. First female, not first African American female, first female, period. So it doesn't matter the race. First female. How did that come about that you started doing that?
Um, I had always really wanted to be a composer for film and TV. So, along the way of all the other things that was happening, fortunately in my career, I was also trying to study, so that because I knew I wanted to get to that at some
Okay.
point. And so, I just wanted to develop those skills. And so I kept doing it on my own records. I would write the string arrangement. I would write the arrangement for the rhythm section. I would do
Okay.
the horns arrangements. They were opportunities that came out of using the platform that I had been given to try to also continue my training
I
with
got
my
you.
own projects. So what what occurred
Hmm.
out of that also was going on the road, getting certain kind of leadership skills,
Sure.
having a band to be able to play the music and all like that. These things didn't necessarily seem like they were directly on the path of where your question is, but they are,
Right.
because it was amassing the skills little by little through different opportunities that came up. It wouldn't seem like they were related, but they were absolutely related, because they gave me opportunities to try some of these very same skills that I would ultimately be putting into these shows. Okay, fast
Wow.
forward a few years, and in 1986, I was with Arista Records, and I was there for 3 years, but only one
Hmm.
record came out. And
Wow.
I wasn't comfortable there at all, and I
Okay.
wanted to leave. This was
Okay.
Clive Davis's label,
Right, Arista.
and he's mega well known music record iconic figure, and particularly at that time had
Right.
signed people like Whitney Houston and
Sh-
Tony Braxton and this one and that one, Gino Vanelli and stuff like that. So I was on that label for that 3 years, but I wasn't happy there at all, and I asked to be released. And
Okay.
when I asked to be released, people said, have you lost your mind? But I wasn't happy there, but I had other skills to, I won't say fall back. Because it wasn't a fall back, where they were skills that I was still trying to acquire, because that was where I was trying to
Right.
go.
Okay.
And I had other skills that I could do. And so I wasn't really afraid of not recording. I love recording, but I wasn't afraid not to record,
Okay.
because I also wanted to do these other things. And a time passed, and then this guy named Robert Townsend, comedian, was doing his first movie called Hollywood
With
Shuffle.
shuffle. Yeah.
And he needed a composer. And this was his first movie. So the whole idea of having a composer for your movie, this was all a relatively new phenomenon for him. He knew about that. He loves music. He's very musical himself.
Right.
But he didn't know necessarily what that world was about. But after he finished his movie, he's trying to get the music done. And he goes to the different agencies and looks at these really amazing film composers, but the names don't mean anything to him.
Right.
He goes to a particular agency, and I think I had maybe signed maybe a month earlier, to the point my name is probably still in pencil at the bottom. But he goes in and he's going through these names, and I'm the name that he recognizes. Why? Because he was a fan of the records
Right.
of Forget Me Nots, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So he says, well, call her. This is what I want. I want to talk to her. And I'm sure that the agents were probably just, horrified for one, but, nevertheless, I got the call, and he asked me to do, if I would do the movie. And the agents insisted that I work with another composer who was more experienced than I was at that time in that field.
Okay.
So I said, okay, no problem. And we worked on the motion picture together. And when Robert, after that movie came out, from the success of it and the cult following that continues to grow and developed after the movie, he got 5 HBO comedy specials called Robert Townsend and His Partners in Crime.
I remember that.
And he needed a music director. And he remembered the work that I had done on the movie, and that he was pleased with it. And he called and said, can you do this? And I said, yeah. So, but it wasn't that different. Put a band together, get it organized, get the music, do the arrangements, take care of the other artists that are on the show in terms of their comfort zone, and be able to do what was needed to be able to do the show. And he had this little vignette in his shows called The Bold, the Black, and the Beautiful.
Yes, I remember that.
And so my film school, everything that I knew how to do, again, was called into play. The film scoring, composer thing, the television thing, the working with artists thing, the band leader thing, the record producer thing, all of these were called into play to do that show. We did those 5 specials, and from those 5 specials, the producer of the NAACP Image Awards called and said, would you be interested in being music director for the Image Awards? I said, okay, sure. So I did that show, and it had grown by then into a pretty big variety show where you had an homage to all the older artists with the newer artists, with all kinds. You're going just from one extreme to the other in terms of representing Black talent, Black excellence in the entertainment. So it was all about play-ons and playoffs and timings and blah blah blah. Anyway, I did that for like 12, 13 years straight. During the time that I was doing that, some people asked me to do the Emmy Awards because the composer got sick.
Okay.
And I was called in. I just knew they had probably 20 other people that they could have called, but the composer got sick. They needed somebody to know we want you. And then from that, the Grammys. So the story, and I think the lesson in it for all of us, is that you never know what one situation is going to do that's going to prepare you for the next situation. And you take all of them seriously and do your best in each one, because you never know. You never know. You would want to do your best anyway for yourself. But the idea is that you never know how it's going to manifest into something else. And that's how those things happen.
That is a, I would say, a blessing and an affirmation for me. And the reason I say that is the first person that said that to me was Fox Sports analyst Chris Broussard. He said a
Mm.
lot of times people want to be on TV like himself and Stephen A. Smith and other guys, and he said the one thing they forget to do is to be great at what they're doing right then and there.
Right then.
So you're trying to skip, and then Michael Collier just told me last night. He said, because
See,
I asked him about, how do you take a small part, in a movie or on a TV show? How do you make it so memorable? And he said, well, because you don't look at it as a small part. You don't look at it and say, oh, I only have this many lines. What you try to do is take that character and try to see how far you can stretch it, based on producers, director, the limp they give. So the same thing what you were saying is you started out, you made great music first as an artist. You putting out your own music, and so when it came time for Robert Townsend to need something, to need a director and a composer, he was a fan of your work, and then it just started trickling down. So it's a lesson to us all, like you said, is to, no matter what you're doing, don't look at it as a small part. Put your best foot forward, because you don't know
exactly.
where that's going to take you next.
Exactly. The other thing I'll say that is an added lesson in that,
Uh-huh.
Otis, is that as artists, we pay attention and we should be paying
Mm,
attention to each other
okay.
because I was given opportunities
Mm-hmm.
by people who saw the value in my music. They weren't looking at the long resume of movies I had scored or the long, because it didn't exist.
Right.
So the faith was, as you said, in the idea of being able to make the logical leap that this person may have the attributes to be able to help me with this. He was new at it too. So we could help each
Each
other
other. Right.
use our levels of expertise that he obviously had and that I obviously had in another area and that he needed, and see what
Immersed.
we could do in trying to lift each other up to be
Right.
able to do something. Because I walked into it wide open and with skills.
Correct. Right.
And he walked into it wide open but with skills too. So after that, then you trust. You trust that it's going to work.
Work.
And you don't forget.
And it led for
And
so
you
much.
allow for other things to maybe happen so that there can be more projects and more opportunities to learn. And in taking care of each other like that, as we're continuing to look out, because there is an artistic community that
Right.
should be looking out. That's the other motion pictures that I did for television were in the same. It was almost exactly the same situation. It was from having seen something else and being able to see not only that thing, but through that thing, other possibilities and skills, and offer an opportunity to let's both get over the goal line and
Right.
work this out. And that kind of thing happens often too. So you are telegraphing at every minute more than just what you're doing in the moment.
In the
You're
moment.
telegraphing many times something else about yourself that somebody may make the difference with them, then picking up the phone and taking a chance.
Well, I think I'm glad your people picked up the phone. It gave me a chance.
Hey, me too.
Cause listen, I people ask me, like, what's the significance of, like, why would you want to interview Patrice Rushen or Mickey Howard or Evelyn Champagne King? And I tell
Ooh, my
people,
goodness.
yeah, I did her, I interviewed her about 3 4 weeks ago. I just
Mm-hmm.
haven't released it yet. But the beautiful part of what I tell people, I'm just looking to interview people I always wanted to talk to. It's just
Thank
that
you.
simple. It's just people I've always wanted to talk to. So,
Mm-hmm.
what artists, what are, if it's one or multiple artists, inspires Patrice Rushen?
Oh man, good. We'd be here all day if I tell you so many, but I'll try to name a few.
Sure, no problem.
Uh, it's gonna sound pretty eclectic, and I think that that's sort of part and parcel of why I am involved in so many different areas. Have had the been involved in lots of different areas because I like
Sure.
a wide variety of things. But I'll start with Stevie Wonder,
Okay.
uh, Michael Jackson, Prince,
Okay.
Shaka. I mentioned her, Aretha Franklin.
Oh wow. Yeah.
I'm gonna reach back because my parents had a record
Hmm.
collection where they played stuff. So Miles Davis,
Oh yes.
uh, Frank Sinatra, Ella
Oh, Blue
Fitzgerald,
Eyes. Yes.
Sarah Vaughan, um, classical music. I heard a lot of classical music. I came up learning that was the vehicle that I learned to play the piano.
Piano.
So
Right.
Mozart,
Mozart.
Brahms, Beethoven. Later, in terms of composition and learning things about that language, Quincy Jones in terms of arranging,
Woo.
Duke Ellington,
Yes.
uh, Ravel, uh, Stravinsky. These are like amazing
Composers.
classical composers, but
Hmm.
listen to a lot of jazz, and that there's that interconnectivity, I think, that would drew me to it.
Right.
And then film composers, John Williams, Jerry Goldsmith, again, Quincy Jones,
Jones. I knew you was going to say that.
and Oliver Nelson, people like that, where you could hear this intersection of excellence, regardless
Yes.
of the style and regardless of the type of job that it was. There was this intersection of excellence that you could not hear.
Right.
As an instrumentalist, listening to Herbie Hancock, George Duke, and
Wow.
Keith Jarrett, as a pianist, and Chick Corea, and those were the people that by the time I had the vocabulary to absorb more of what
Hmm.
they were doing and appreciate that, I was like, oh man, those were the people I heard. And that sent me backwards. What did I miss? So that sent me back to Bill Evans and Wynton Kelly and all these other great
Let me throw one name
pianists.
at you. Let me throw
Okay,
one
come on.
name at you that because you play the piano. So he's one of my favorite jazz artists, Joe
Come on.
Sample.
Joe Sample, my friend. That's right. Big influence on me. The biggest influence was that this was one of the very first people that kind of, in the way that the Crusaders were going about their music
Okay.
back in the day when they were even
Yeah.
called the Jazz Crusaders. That's one of the groups that gave us permission to be able to be knowledgeable about the music in terms of jazz and have that vocabulary, but also to be soulful and funky. That they weren't mutually exclusive. They
Right.
were all a part of the offering, and because of their rich heritage
Hmm.
and regional understanding of how music could communicate to people,
Right.
he was one of the proponents of that, and that whole band.
Yeah.
The
My
Crusaders
favorite by
became.
him. Yeah, my favorite album by him. I play it all the time, especially my quiet place where I can think and sit. Was his
Mhm.
album Invitations.
Yep. Know
Just
it well.
classic. Ooh.
Yeah, I have I admired his work very much. We became friends,
That's great.
and I miss him. I miss
I
his
miss him
energy,
too. I miss him.
But we've got that legacy of so much great music
Music.
and good good composition as well that he did.
I have just two more questions for you. Uh, this next question, it's you segue right into it, but who is Patrice Rushen?
Well, I'm still trying to find out too. But I think if I was going to try to sum it up, I would just say that I'm just I'm somebody that loves the platform of music as a means of expression,
Okay.
that I've lived and continue to live what I would call a charmed life. And I know that my passion and my purpose
Mm-hmm.
have collided
Okay.
in such a way that the work that I continue to do
Mm-hmm.
involves being able to take the information that I have, continue to work it in ways that allow for me to be able to continue my own expression, but also to offer parts of that path by being who I am, offer parts of that path to other people. So to perpetuate the music also. Uh multi-dimensional. I have to say music is my platform of expression, but I also I'm a family person. I've got kids, I've got
Yes.
husband, I have dogs, a mortgage, you know.
What
So
kind of
I've got
dogs you
family.
have?
Oh, I have greyhounds. We rescue
Ooh,
retired
okay.
racers. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So those are aspects too. Otis, I see the art. I'm learning to appreciate the fact that there's art in everything.
Yes.
And one thing over here influences the thing over there, influences the thing over there, influences the thing over there. And looking at that interconnectivity that has to happen, it's never boring. So
Always learning.
I'm trying to learn something all the time, and I'm always trying to enjoy that journey of learning, and it manifests itself in lots of different kinds of activities. And I'm very fortunate in that way. And that's the kind of information that I try
That you
to
put out.
put out there. Exactly.
My final question for you is, how does it make you feel to have created that classic song, that when I didn't even notice until I looked at your bio that it wasn't just Will Smith sampling the song. You kind of helped compose that for the movie. So
Well, I have to be honest with you.
uh,
The song "Forget Me Nots" that you're talking
right,
about, that then
right,
ultimately was in that movie Men in Black. When we first played it for the record company, they didn't like it. At another time, that lack of understanding about what it was would have kept it out. But in the early '80s,
right.
the black acts paid for the paper clips and the rubber bands and the stamp. So they weren't so quick, even if they didn't like it, they weren't so quick to get in the way,
Right,
because the expectation, I was at a label that was predominantly white
right,
and had a major success with some major artists. And we were at that time kind of an experiment for this particular label,
okay,
because they saw the value in what was going on at Black radio. And yes, it was that divided at that time.
yeah, I remember.
You do. But the idea was that there was a marketplace there that could be cultivated. And I think that there was a corporate decision, we'll say, for
Hmm.
this particular boutique company that was huge, to experiment with this other area. What do they have to lose? They already
Right.
had all these megastars, da 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 da.
Hmm.
So that was taking advantage of that format where, again, you had artists who had jazz sensibilities, but who had jazz traditional sensibilities, but who had commercial sensibilities as well.
Well,
So I was signed right around the time that Donald Byrd and the Blackbirds were signed to the same label. Lee Ritenour was signed to the same label.
okay.
Grover Washington Jr. was signed to
Grove.
the label. Dee Dee Bridgewater was signed to the label. Lenny
Okay.
White and the group Peanut Butter signed to the label. And myself, among the first artists of that type to be with this label.
That was the second time I heard that name. When you said what was the group?
Peanut Butter.
Yeah,
Lenny
that's the
White and
second.
Peanut Butter.
That's you know
That
the
was the
first.
group that he had that introduced a very young Marcus Miller. a very young, Lenny White coming out of Return to Forever and
Well,
all
the
that.
first time I heard it was from Lenny Williams.
Ah,
He mentioned it in an interview.
uh-huh.
He mentioned that. So when you said, I said that's the second time I heard
We
that heard
were
that.
there. We were all there together, and we were doing what
Right.
we were doing, separately, of course. So by the time I did Forget Me Nots, that was like my third album in.
Album. Right.
And we turned it in, and we felt very good about the album. This album had Remind Me on it. Number One is on it. There's a lot of good things that were on there that we knew it was deep enough, and we had enough experience, I think, just, doing things that we felt like good about it. We turned it in, and you can imagine our shock and dismay when it was like, oh, we don't hear nothing on here. But here's what was different.
Okay.
We took matters into our own hands and said, well, we can't make people love it, but we need to get it in front of them. And that's how powerful radio was at the time. So if we could get it
Yes.
to radio and it would get played, then the people would say, love it, hate it,
Right.
whatever. So we put our little pennies together, and we bought 3 weeks of independent promotion.
Okay.
We, meaning myself, the producer, Charles Mims, Freddie Washington, who was bass player, and myself. And we paid for 3 weeks of independent promotion. And that bad boy took off. I went out on the road. I was on a special tour. I can't remember what they call it, Jazz Explosion All Stars or
Okay.
something like that.
Okay.
On this tour was Roy Ayers, myself, Stanley Turrentine, Lenny White was the drummer.
Okay.
And what I chose to do when I had my feature, we all played together, but when I
Right.
had my feature, I
Okay.
chose to do Forget Me Nots in this band to introduce it to more audience.
And
And we never looked back. The record just went.
then
To
you
the
had a
tune
new
that,
medium
and then at a
called
new
interview.
medium. Now watch this. So a few years out, it's come and gone, and Grammy nominated and the whole nine. Oh, can't get much better than that. A decade later, this movie called Big with Tom Hanks
Right.
used it in a trampoline scene. Oh, ching ching. Great. Fast forward another 20 years later, I get this cassette in the mail, and they say, please come and pick up your one-time payment of $2,000 for the use, small sampling in the new film Men in Black coming out, starring Tommy Lee Jones, Will Smith, so on and
Okay.
so forth. I had seen the trailer. I was able to be a movie buff at that time, and I would
Okay.
go to the movies office. So I had seen the trailer, but the music wasn't in the trailer.
Okay.
So I had
Okay.
no idea. So I get this, but I knew the movie was coming out, and so I put the tape in the machine. I played it. I was like, small sample.
Okay.
I was like,
He rapping over the whole song.
but sampling was new,
Right.
and nobody had righteously figured out how to handle it.
Mm-hmm.
And it probably sat on somebody's desk for weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, the movie's gonna come out in 3 weeks. They had to get it done. So anyway, they sent it out. I called my attorney. He says, okay, make a copy of the tape and get it to me. And we didn't have FedEx back then. So, you're waiting for a couple of days for it to get across town. And he says, okay, I think this is not a sample request, really. This is a copyright issue. This is, you should be sharing in the copyright of the composition Men in Black, because for all intents and purposes, your music
Right.
is the music of this. So you should be a composer along with Will and whoever else.
Okay.
And you share in that way. And I said, well, that sounds amazing. He says, well, we'll see if we can get it, because that's a different ask than what they're asking.
Right.
And at first they said no. And so I asked my lawyer, well, when they say no, what do I say? He said, you tell them to take your half out.
Okay.
Well, you can't take the music out. What you rapping to? And
Correct.
remember the movie, I just saw the trailer. That bad boy was about to be released. So thankfully, we were able to work it all out. And again, so I share in that copyright of Forget Me Nots, and the
No.
writers of Forget Me Nots, all we all share, and it worked
Right.
out quite fine. Now the moral to the story is this: this was the song that the company didn't like. Now, if I had gone with that alone, I don't know what would have happened. But the lesson in it for me was, first of all, put out things that you believe in and that you can stand by,
Right.
and that you would be willing to support yourself if you have to. And these days, man, that's really the way now. It's so few people that have the kind of record company support, because there are no record companies like that now. You're
Right.
much more in a situation where your investment in the time, in the and your talent also has to, you don't have the luxury of just doing that. You also have to have an entrepreneur
Correct.
consciousness about it. And even if you involve a record company or a distribution company or a production company or whomever, you are partners in this thing, and you do have to have that kind of knowledge and that kind of belief in your product, such that the extra time and extra effort that it might take to get it off the ground, you
Okay.
don't see it as being extra. You actually see it as being part of a process.
Well, the other lesson that you taught us as well is you don't just, like you said, they sent the tape in and said, "Come pick up your check," you know, eh, and some people would have just said, "Yeah, okay, oh, let me get that 2,000," and you was like, and when you listened to it, you knew like, nah, this is not just a sample. And guess what you did? You allow a person to, that's what they do, to do what they do, as far as your lawyer. And sometimes we got to realize it's okay when this is not your area of expertise. Get the person that expertise, so he got you more than what the crumbs that they were throwing you. In other words, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that
Mm-hmm.
I hope when everybody sees that aspiring music artists and people in business, period, just realize when you don't understand something or you think it's great, get with an attorney that can broaden it and stretch it out and say, no, it looks great. It's gonna be great for them. It's not gonna be great. You're gonna be upset. So once again, Ms. Rushen, I appreciate you coming on the show and giving us your time. I consider you a treasure to us, a treasure to music. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep staying classy, and just being yourself. And I'd love to have you back on the show again and pair you up with somebody, maybe like Najee or Lenny
All right.
Williams, something like that. We did Robert Cool Bell, just to get that
Mm-hmm.
vibe from that time. And I would love to, depend on your schedule, or something, is have you back and do something fun like that.
Excellent. Well, that sounds great. This has been a pleasure. Thanks for the conversation. Thanks for the interruption. I appreciate it so much. And to your fans and everybody
Hmm.
within our purview, as far as our our
Sure.
listening public, please, everyone, continue to be strong. Do your best, and you may think it's a small thing, but those small things that are the right things all add up to us being able to get better, work towards better days, so we can do our thing.
Well, stay safe
You
and
too.
stay blessed. And we
You
love you.
too. Thank you.
Peace.
Peace.